Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon for those in India. Hope everyone is safe and staying home. So I welcome you all on behalf of Hindu Forum Britain, Friends of FISI, Friends of Indian Society, and Kashmiri Pandit Society UK. As you know, we are doing this first live event on our Facebook page. We'll be joined by a special guest. So let's get started. As you know, the world is battling an unknown, unseen enemy currently in the form of coronavirus, and this virus has caused uh, a lot of disruption, and the nations are trying to adapt to this changes. And India, our motherland, has remained the center of world's attention as it has kept the crisis under control and using the lockdown measures, and the government has taken some unprecedented measures which the all this dealing of Indian governments of this complex challenge, not just of this pandemic, but the economic, cultural, ethical, and religious challenges faced by this complex, big, populated country, India. So, joining us live um from Delhi, Sushil Pandit, a leading political analyst, Kashmiri Hindu activist, to discuss the challenge faced by India and how Indic wisdom may help us to prepare for future. So I will just um, ask Sushil ji. Uh, Sushil ji, if you can please turn on um, your camera.
How am I supposed to do that?
So I've just asked you to start your video. Namaste Sushil ji, welcome.
Namaste, Puneet ji.
कैसे हैं आप?
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule. आप जब एडिनबरा आए थे तो सबको बड़ा अच्छा लगा था आपको सुन के, और आप लंदन में भी आपका का इवेंट हुआ था. अनफॉर्चुनेटली हम एक और इवेंट करना चाहते थे, बट ड्यू टू दिस कोरोना वायरस पेंडेमिक वी आर अनेबल टू do that event live. But this virtual world is now the new normal. So thank you so much, Sushil ji, for joining us. So first of all, we will start with 1 minute of silence. A 1 minute of silence for all those people who have lost their life, and then I will start the program. So let's pause for 1 minute and pray for all the departed souls. Hari Om. Okay, Sushil ji. So India has extended the lockdown for further period. So how do you think people are coping up with this situation? You have the ground, because we can see only what we see in the news channels. But can you please update us? Was this a right decision to extend the lockdown for further period? And what do you think? What the measures government has been taking about? Can you highlight all the things about this pandemic and how India has been dealing with it? Thank you.
Thank you, Puneet ji, for having me, and welcome all the friends on this live interaction. Instead of answering that question straight away, must share with you the facts first, and then you decide whether it was right or wrong. India hasn't ever faced this kind of pandemic before. There was no cure. There is no cure still. We had no clue in terms of stopping it. We knew it had potential to spread from human to human. It didn't originate here. We've learned from how it spread in China. And in the absence of any cure or a great healthcare system able to support a widespread sickness, the only option we had was to slow it down, to stop it from spreading. And a big sledgehammer solution, a very blunt, very coarse solution, not a very sophisticated, very fine, very targeted, but a very sledgehammer kind of solution was to shut down the entire country, which meant that people stayed put wherever they were, in their homes, in their relatives' homes, out traveling, wherever they were asked to just stay put there. And not just stay put there, but keep a social distance, try and avoid crowded areas, literally self-quarantine themselves. Because we knew the only way for this virus to spread was through human contact. And it was going to spread exponentially. It was one-to-one, but when one gets infected and it infects 4 more, and those 4 more get into geometric proportions, the potential to quickly spread it like an epidemic into entire population was a real threat. So whether you were infected or whether you were healthy, safe, one had to just freeze you wherever you were. And that's what the government did. It started with a dress rehearsal on one single day on 23rd of March. Sorry, 21st of March, I think it was Sunday. And then from 23rd of March, it called for a big clampdown on everything. This is unprecedented. The idea was and should have been that when you freeze the entire country, 1.3 billion of its population, all the big cities, the villages, the fossil towns, was to go test in a big manner in order to identify the infected within the population, take them out into a secure place and treat them and not allow them to infect others. But in the absence of any testing infrastructure, large-scale availability of testing kits, this couldn't be achieved. So at best, what you did or what you tried to do was, by the time you mobilize testing capacities, you at least don't let it spread. So the first lockdown went without much testing. So things remained in a bit of a status quo. We were not able to reverse or fight back the infection. We just about slowed it down, and you could see the growth when the testing started. Primarily due to lack of testing, you didn't get too many numbers, but the numbers were very small. People with symptoms were few. Then we realized that there are asymptomatic infected patients as well, who may not outwardly show any manifest signs of infection, but are carriers and are as uh, dangerous carriers as those with manifest symptoms. And now, as the testing has gone up to more than 100,000 every day, we are getting huge numbers. We more than doubled in a matter of 10 days. Now, though the people who've recovered is one of the best ratios across the world, our casualty, mortality ratios are also one of the lowest in the world. But the way number of infected people is growing, we don't seem to have a handle on it yet. Hence, in all likelihood, on 13th, we are going to see another round of lockdown. Indeed, a lot of state governments, because we have a federal structure, we have more than 30 states and union territories, and they are free to govern their territories depending on the requirements of their population and the area. A lot of chief ministers have already started asking for continuation, as they did the last time. Even before center announced a lockdown, they had extended the lockdown in their respective states. So we are in for a longer haul than what we thought. And therefore it is in all likelihood going to take the entire month of May. But here we have a few caveats. Like the second lockdown emerged with few exceptions. The country was divided into 3 zones, red, orange, and green. We also decided that those areas, those districts, where the infected population and the new infected patients are turning up in a larger number, should not be dealt the same way as the other regions. The orange region are those areas where you don't have a patient coming up in the last 7 days. And green areas are those where there are no COVID patients. So green areas would open, orange areas will have limited mobility and opening, and red areas will have a strict lockdown. This might sound theoretically feasible, but this has its challenges because areas are not so demarcated in watertight antiseptic compartments. There are linkages. Those who work in one area live in another. Those who need their household requirements depend on the areas which are under lockdown, or vice versa. For example, rural hinterland is largely orange, and they need to service large cities for their needs for vegetables, fruit, perishables and non-perishables. And the cities are in a lockdown, become red areas. So interaction between these zones is not entirely preventable, and thus limited mobility in one place, allowing access to the other, will result in a conflagration of sorts which needs to be prevented at all cost. And I guess this is going to continue till such time new cases continue to emerge in large numbers, Though there are claims of flattening the curve, but my hunch is it is more to reassure people and not let the panic set in than really feel good and confident about having come on top of the problem. Government has a huge challenge on hands. We have a huge population. Most of this population is in an economically weak and vulnerable zone, and their dependence on their services, their petty businesses, their dependence on cities, which are the locomotives of our economy, will make life difficult for large sections of our population, even if they are in green zone. So it is the economy which is going to create pressures for letting go of some of the stringent measures which are otherwise necessary. We already face a debate in terms of life and livelihood. A lot of glib comments like, if Corona won't get us, hunger would, are making rounds. This doesn't help, because mitigating hunger and meeting basic needs is still within the realm of the government, it's still within the reach. We haven't really reached a point where we've run out of food, we've run out of reserves. It is more of a distribution issue, and if we are able to handle that, chances are we'll tide over our primary needs of survival and existence. But if COVID goes out of hand, the infrastructure in the country isn't there in place to cope with it. So there is no way you can take those risks where people die in large numbers. I would reiterate here, we've never been in this zone, ever. Just to give you an example, it took us 200,000 years, 2 lakh years, to reach the population of 2 billion on this planet of human beings. And it took just 100 years more to grow 4 times. We are almost 8 billion now. Last pandemic happened 100 years ago, and it consumed millions. Life was much simpler, a lot less complex at that time. Connectivity was poor, communication was extremely poor. Civil aviation, telephones were rare. Means of mass communication like television, almost non-existent. At that time, interdependency in the world was also not as high. 100 years hence, we are far too interconnected. Economy has grown far more complex. Newer vocations, careers, means of livelihood have emerged. Most of these are derivative layers on the primary sources. The primary sources remain intact. People grow food, people rear cattle, people produce milk and the products thereof. All that continues to meet our existential needs, essential needs. But there are several layers of non-essentials that have gathered over a period. And that seemed to be running the economy a lot more than the essentials. It's the case of tail wagging the dog. All our financial derivatives, sophisticated banking, currency swaps, stock markets, commodity speculation, huge amount of fashion industry, eating out, leisure, tourism. These are layers and layers and layers. Recreation, um, films, music, technology. All these are non-primary sources of livelihood. Though it may seem that we can't live without them, but we've suddenly realized, thanks to COVID, that we are forced to differentiate between the essentials and non-essentials all over again. It's a matter of existence now, and we all seem to know very clearly what we really need to live and what we can do without what is discretionary. So to that extent, we seem to be rebooting, as it were. We are on the verge of reinventing this world. It'll be very easy if this vaccine comes and we treat everyone and everything comes back to as it was and we go along our lives like we were living earlier. But I don't see that happening, frankly. Already, a lot of people are saying that COVID is here to stay. And because it is here to stay, it will bring about phenomenal changes in our lives, in the way we look at the world, in the way we look at our needs, our wants, our desires, the way we interact with each other, and what we spend on, how we make that money. All that is potentially going to change and change drastically. So it's a huge intervention. One thing good about this intervention is that it has not been forced by human beings themselves, as in, it is not driven by some ideology, it is not driven by somebody's quirk of an idea, somebody who thought that the world needed to be reordered and re-engineered, like several ideologies have tried to do. In the last 100 years, we saw Soviet Revolution of 1919, we saw the Long March of Mao, we saw Cultural Revolution, we've seen Jewish Holocaust, we've seen a lot of human interventions where strange ideas have tried to reshape this world. And we've gone through considerable grief due to those. But this one is a given. It seems like some kind of a writ from high above. There's very little you can do about it except going back to the basics, reconfiguring what it takes to survive, what it takes to get future ready. And as the entire challenge unfolds gradually, I guess we will learn and adapt going forward, which is going to change things substantially, is what I feel. That was a long answer to a short question, Puneet. Sorry for taking so long.
No, thank you. Thank you, Sushil ji, for that opening remark. I understand this is a complex problem. It's just not India, and the entire world is facing. So just for our viewers who have just joined, so you can ask questions on Facebook on the comment section to Sushil ji. We've already got some questions on Twitter as well. So to ask your question on Twitter, you can just use the hashtag #AskSushilji. So hashtag #AskSushilji. So Sushilji, I know you've highlighted the complex challenges which is posed by this tragedy and India and how India is dealing with it. There were some questions. I think you've already answered those questions in your opening remark. Someone Mithun Saka tweeted that um, as if Corona won't kill, the hunger would kill. That you've already addressed. He was mentioning that the poor are the most sufferer for this crisis in India. So, uh, and the other thing people are asking that this India is being commended by all over world of how it has dealt this. If you look at the proportion of the population, the number of cases are significantly low compared to other Western countries. So, what do you think? Is there something to do with our Hindu civilization, Indic wisdom, which has helped us um, with curtaining the numbers? So could you please highlight on both these things, like how the poor would deal after this crisis is over? Is should government intervene? Like in UK, the UK government has announced a 330 billion corona package. So highlighting both the things about how the poor would cope up once this crisis is over. Another is how the Indic wisdom and the Hindu civilization things would help us to prepare. As you have said, that this change of a mindset and a lot of things would change the way we would behave in future. So could you please summarize this thing and answer our viewers, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Puneet, for this question. You see, as I would like to reiterate, this is still unfolding in front of us. We don't know enough about it yet. While we knew that this was human to human transmission that spread the virus, and that animals don't get it, but there were stray cases of certain animals also contracting this virus. There's also a great deal of speculation that it has emerged from the bats. We are yet to get to the bottom of it. About a month back, there was a huge amount of speculation in terms of how India was differently poised vis-a-vis this challenge. One was the fact that we don't live in such an antiseptic environment as the first world does. Whether it is the hygiene issue, whether it is the climate, whether it is the lack of infrastructure, the problems like malaria, typhoid, and a whole lot of other issues that keep sweeping this country from time to time. And therefore, at birth, the inoculation that every child goes through, and from time to time, the treatments they receive in the event of a malaria, let's say, or a chikungunya, or a cholera, or asthma, or a whole lot of other problems, typhoid, encephalitis. You know, we have more than our fair share of such problems in different parts of the country. So such issues have given us better resistance than the rest of the world. Till about 10-15 years back, we used to laugh at Western tourists who would come looking for bottled water here. And we would say that their tummies can't hold against even slightest of bacteria, whereas we have enough resistance and immunity against a whole lot of other infections. So that And the fact that we are a hot climate country, we are blessed with good amount of sun and we are heading into summer. So all these issues combined will help us tide over better. And that we also have largely a vegetarian population, and this is a meat eater's problem. So there were such notions, but gradually we got to know that this virus has absolutely no connection with any of these and more. And nobody is immune to it. But yes, you can avoid getting infected with it if you take to a certain regimen. For example, we heard that the virus sits in your mouth and throat for a while before it descends into your lungs. So if you keep drinking hot water, if you keep gargling, take steam, chances are it will not get into your lungs and create further complications. It will land into your stomach and will be taken care of by your digestive juices. Then there are other ways of building immunity. Vitamin C, we have a lot of amla, we have a lot of spices in our cuisine. So chances are that we handle it better. So a combination of the traditional ways of building immunity, herbs, concoctions, eating and drinking habits, condiments, yoga, breathing exercises. These were considered as a good bulwark against a virus to prevent it from entering your body, and if it does still manages to enter, then not let it get into lungs and keep your lungs strong. To that extent, I think we have a bit of an advantage over the rest of the world. But as I said, the last word on it is yet to be said. It is still in the realm of self-assurance, speculation, and opinion. Going forward, we'll know better, more about it. But as of now, nothing. There's no reason to lower one's guard. There is no way one can take it easy and say that we have some special blessing from the God Almighty that we'll be any less affected than the rest of the world and therefore we need to worry. That will be suicidal. That we must restrain ourselves, that we must not allow comorbidities to come up, we must control our other ailments well enough. If we have a healthy body, chances are we'll fight it better. We need to look at that. But there are such huge exceptions. I heard 2 days back that a 31-year-old Amit Dahiya, a Delhi police cop, a strapping young man with great healthy body, couldn't survive 48 hours and succumb to COVID. 48 hours. There was a lady police officer in Noida, just given birth to her second daughter, and in less than a week, in her early 30s, she was consumed by COVID. And these are frightening examples. So it is not just those who are on the wrong side of 50s and 60s or who have comorbidities. It is perfectly young and healthy with hardly any symptom who are becoming victims and are consumed by this virus. So we need to be very, very, very careful. We, of course, have a huge repertoire of options to keep our immunity levels high, to not get it, and a whole lot of um, regimen to handle it if we do get it, if we are unfortunate enough to get it. But we don't yet have a cure, and we don't have any reason to take things lightly. I think I would end it there.
Thank you, Sushil. I think we are getting a lot of questions for you now, opening up. So as Sushil advised, keep your immunity level high, eat vitamin C, do yoga, but don't take it for granted. It will be suicidal. So follow government's instructions, stay at home, and maintain social distancing. Whatever your local government, be it in UK or India, or wherever you're watching this program, just follow government guideline, and it would be suicidal if you just think that there is a cure, or you can just have the medicine which can help. So thank you, Sushil ji. Now slightly changing the topic, we have got Alok Singh asking you a question. He's saying, why is Western media like BBC, Guardian, etc. are so anti-India? They always highlight only negative news about India. What can we do as an NRI? What do you suggest? Thank you.
Um, I'm sure those who have been monitoring and and noticing these large media behemoths would realize that this is not new. There has been a marked anti-India bias within these news organizations for a long time. That's how they have traditionally been. And whenever you see some pro-India story, it is a lot more condescending and patronizing in its compliments than actually giving us our due. So a stray story on yoga, on some spiritual issue, or on some economic miracle would highlight us. But in the last 20 odd years, ever since you see a noticeable shift in our polity, you'll find this aggression, this hostility growing. And this is because there has been a certain kind of mindset that has come to slot India in a certain box. Their connections in India are with the like-minded people. So if a leftist and pseudo-liberal view of India dominated the discourse right from the independence, then this is the outcome of that. India embarked on a very different kind of foreign policy from the very beginning. In the immediate aftermath of the World War II, we had the Cold War growing and becoming more and more confrontational into 60s and 70s. And race for atomic weapons, race for weaponizing the space, made this confrontation almost lunatic. There was a syndrome coined MAD, which was mutually assured destruction, because the number of nuclear warheads with both the blocks the Warsaw Pact countries and the NATO countries was such that they could destroy this planet many times over. And therefore, India's foreign policy of non-alignment and getting a third, pole growing, though its relevance and its effectiveness was always questioned. It looked more like grandstanding and homilies and pious intentions. In the real world, those two blocks called the shots, and non-aligned movement itself was divided and veered towards either one pole or the other, and had become a playground for these two superpower military blocs. But there was a left liberal consensus, even if it was for lip service, that political correctness, no matter how hypocritical it was, became the gold standard of political conduct. That consensus, that worldview began to change at the turn of the millennium. India had the first non-Congress government that completed its tenure. And that government not only completed its tenure, it ran a tenuous coalition, but it also, in the very beginning of its tenure, went ahead to make India nuclear in 1998. That cast this political formation in a different slot. They were called the BJP, the RSS, the Hindu right, the nationalists, call them what you may. They were seen as strident and hardline and out to change a lot. And those changes were visible. If someone was looking for the evidence, there were quite a few of them going around. And going nuclear was one of them. And in a world where seeking nuclear power, trying to defend yourself against nuclear threats was considered unpardonable, non-proliferation was the mantra. Nobody was willing to give us, guarantee us our security, and at the same time would not allow us to secure ourselves. So in such a world, when we took our own decisions, we were looked at with a great deal of suspicion. Meanwhile, Gujarat happened, and all hell broke loose. The current Prime Minister, who was then the Chief Minister of Gujarat, was vilified, was pilloried, was painted in the darkest of hues, and we all know how the propagandist carried the day, and there were travel restrictions to the extent that he was unwelcome in certain countries. 10 years of UPA rule perhaps assured some of these people that they have averted this shift in India. But those 10 years saw India suffering a huge amount on account of terror, on account of attacks. Mumbai attacks were the high point. Our railways, our public transport, our institutions were routinely attacked. Our civilians targeted, our marketplaces littered with blood and corpses of innocent civilians. And our response to all this was tepid, to say the least. it was a reaction to such helplessness that a strong leadership was catapulted into center 6 years back. And that almost acted like a catalyst. The story went around that India has changed overnight. We have a leadership now which is not in the gray zone, but in a black and white contrast, could be painted in the darkest of hues. So the left and the pseudo-liberal discourse went into overdrive. When it was evident, the writing was on the wall for the 2014 elections, that there was going to be a change, everyone predicted that India will burn, rivers of blood will flow, India will go down into riots, go up in flames. This kind of leadership, such kind of government is simply not welcome, is undesirable. And we saw 5 years of not a single riot, not a single breach of peace, absolute calm and harmony, and great degree of renewal and resurgence. India continued to display remarkable restraint. Sometimes, in fact, the supporters of this government were horrified that we gave a mandate for not this kind of response. This kind of response is why we changed UPA. But why isn't this government honoring the mandate and defending this country more robustly? However, due to lack of a better alternative and a very good work done on several other fronts, including poverty alleviation, redistribution of wealth, making an average poor Indian's life a lot more comfortable, rural housewives delivered cooking gas, electricity, electrification of all the villages in the country, availability of broadband, a huge amount of financial inclusion through banking. These changes were noticeable and felt. And that brought this government back at the helm. Those who were pitted against this government, those who were interested in politically pillorying this government, felt extremely disappointed and went into overdrive. Some of the political agenda of this government, which was kept in abeyance in the previous term, started to show up because there was a great deal of impatience on those issues, and we saw these issues this patience bearing fruit with respect to Kashmir, with respect to Ayodhya. All the previous governments used to wink and nudge at Supreme Court not to address the issue of Ayodhya. But this government stood by the courts and said, you go ahead and decide. We'll stand by your decision and we'll implement it on ground. So such political backing and such risk-taking ability, such decisiveness is being resented because the old order, the old power structure, the old vested interests are feeling increasingly weak and irrelevant. And their linkages in the West, who they have been feeding over the years with exaggerated stories have been activated. But more than that, even this government hasn't made enough effort. They've actually completely been indifferent to cultivating these media organizations. They've actually neglected it completely, as if they don't matter. So, in this world of over connectivity and information overload, accessibility to these media organizations through internet, we consume more of this media than ever before. And it amplifies itself in an echo chamber. Those who consume this media seem to think that that is what the entire world is consuming, and everyone and their dog is thinking differently about the world, about India, which is not a fact. Large number of Indians don't even bother, don't even know that such a circus is going on in the Western capitals, and there is so much storm brewing in the teacups of New York and London and Dubai. And it just doesn't matter. But for those who are sensitive to opinion, they must take note and do something about it as opposed to wailing aloud. There is a lot that can be done. Our Prime Minister, when he's sensitive to these issues, he's shown how effective he is. If you remember, during the course of last general election, there was a cover story, Divider in Chief, in the Time magazine. And another issue, they were singing praises of Modi with another article. So he knows how to reach out and how to undo the damage done by them. But when he ignores them, when he is unwilling to take note, then he just lets them be because it just doesn't matter. He's indifferent and he behaves as if he couldn't care less. So that's where we are. I'm not saying that we should completely be indifferent to it, but at the same time shouldn't be oversensitive and give them too much weight. We must have the argument. We must have the facts. And today, in the day of social media, our Twitter handles, our blogs, our videologs, our other means of countering such propaganda are very effective, and their presence, their effectiveness is felt when they assert themselves. So that's where we are vis-a-vis these media organizations. We need to deal with them, treat them with a healthy dose of contempt and so much of sensitivity.
I agree with you, Sushilji. I think, as Sushilji highlighted, that India's development story and financial inclusion started with 2014 when Prime Minister Modi took over, and all the vested interests are just feeling helpless. So they are trying to propagate things which are anti-India. On the same note, I think there's another question from Chiranjeev Podyalji from Nepali Hindu Forum, who's mentioned the same thing: why the Indian journalists are so anti-Modi, and what do you think is the solution, and all those things. So just for the viewers who have just joined us, you can tweet us, you can comment your questions. Sushilji will take all those questions and answer. We've got a lot of questions, Sushilji, from your favorite topic of Kashmir. So I will read out all those questions and you can just summarize all that in one package. So one thing, somebody, his name is in Tamil, I think I can't read it. So he has said 30 years of Kashmiri exodus. Modi government has abrogated Article 370. Are you feeling satisfied or is it nullified? And then another question from KPCS team in UK, who is saying, as a part of, just a second. Yeah, there is a lot of angst about development in J&K. Please, could you give us an update on what has happened since August 5 announcement? why the sudden rise in terrorism incident despite lockdown? And Sushilji, I was also reading your Republic articles 2 steps back. So can you please highlight our viewers what is happening in JNK right now, and also let this person know whether you are happy. Is Article 370 abrogation is now fulfilled? You're happy, or you want government to do more about it? So both your article about 2 steps back on Republic, where you've highlighted how the August 5th announcement has changed the domicile process and other things. So can you just summarize about Kashmir
Yes,
370 abrogation, as well as your article about the article you have written for Republic? Thank you.
yes, sure. So, first things first, August 5 decisions were immensely important. They are a huge watershed in India's political journey since 1947. Article 370 is a legacy of our partition and Kashmir's accession and our constitution building process, where an exception was created for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And this was wholly unnecessary. First of all, just a small background as to what is it that you were opposed to Article 370 for. Article 370 created an exception for the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the then state of Jammu and Kashmir. What were those exceptions? The exception was that Indian Parliament, our highest sovereign body, which had a jurisdiction over every square inch of land called India, did not have jurisdiction over the state of Jammu and Kashmir with respect to making laws, except for 2 or 3 subjects. Parliament of India could not frame legislation for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Only the Jammu and Kashmir State Assembly could make laws for themselves. Now, this was a big one. These are sovereignty issues. And we willingly diluted our sovereignty over the state of Jammu and Kashmir by making this exception. The second exception we made through a Constitution Order 35A in 1954, where we allowed the state assembly the freedom to accept or reject our constitution in the manner it deemed fit. So they were empowered to pick and choose which part of Indian constitution would apply to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and if it does, with what kind of exceptions and modifications. It could create its own policy and laws under these rights, and they couldn't be challenged in any court of law under any provision of Indian constitution. Such was the immunity granted. So in the name of autonomy, we alienated the state of Jammu and Kashmir from the Indian framework in terms of our rights, in terms of the jurisdiction. For example, our Supreme Court had no jurisdiction. For example, our Election Commission had no jurisdiction. Our Comptroller and Auditor General had no jurisdiction. Our citizens in rest of India, if they wanted to go to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, had to take a permit. It was like a visa. Can you imagine? And the state disenfranchised lakhs of citizens of the state of Jammu and Kashmir on the ground that they were not the permanent residents of the state. And these were those who had come to Jammu and Kashmir during the time of partition from erstwhile Pakistan and Pakistan occupied Kashmir. they were largely Hindus and Sikhs who were fleeing for their lives. And the state of Jammu and Kashmir said they cannot be part of our population. So they were denied even the right to vote in panchayat elections or assembly elections, though they could vote in the Lok Sabha elections, the parliamentary elections. They were denied any access to states, schools and institutions, to state government jobs. They couldn't even buy an inch of land to build a house, to own a shop, agricultural land, orchards. They were literally rendered stateless. And Government of India let this happen. That the state government did this is still understandable because state was handed over to Sheikh Abdullah, who was a bigot, who was communally minded and did not want the proportion of an overwhelming Muslim majority be diluted even slightly if he had inducted those Hindus and Sikhs who were living in that territory. That he was a bigot and he did this is understandable. But Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and successive regimes were out to build a secular India, a democratic India, an India driven by a constitution which was perhaps the most liberal document anywhere in the world. And you make an exception of that democracy, that secularism, that liberal constitutional liberties for the state of Jammu and Kashmir just so that Sheikh Abdullah could enjoy unbridled freedom. This is what Article 370 did. Now, why was this done? This was done because Jammu and Kashmir was a Muslim majority state. So what? Well, Pandit Nehru wanted to tell the Muslims that though we are building a secular nation, but because you are Muslims, because you didn't trust me when I asked you not to divide India, not to partition India, now I want to demonstrate to you how generous I can be, that I would create a Pakistan on the territory of India to please you. That I would hold my secularism, my democracy, my constitutional mechanisms in abeyance and let you do as you please because you are Muslims, because you are a Muslim majority state. This is what created a legitimacy for separatism. We ourselves were saying you are separate, you are different. And this is what was abused, this autonomy, these privileges, such exceptionalism was abused to the hilt. Those who were inimical to India, those who were as bigoted as Sheikh Abdullah, those who resented being part of a Hindu India, used every opportunity to indoctrinate minds, to poison minds. And we saw the results few decades later. A small Hindu minority, which was in single digits, was pushed out violently, brutally, and cleansed from Kashmir. A genocide of Hindus was committed. And the governments in Delhi, successive governments in Delhi, turned a blind eye. Forget reversing this genocide, they didn't even punish those who committed the heinous crimes. On the contrary, they were allowed passports. Government of India lobbied with foreign capitals to offer them visas. They traveled the world. They even went to Pakistan. Some of them got married there. And Government of India would spend money on them, on their air tickets, on their hotel bills, on their fuel, on their security, on their treatment abroad. They ran up crores of bills that Indian taxpayer paid, all in the name of winning hearts and minds. All in the name of winning their trust and making them patriotic. We were paying a huge ransom, we were paying bribes, and none of it worked. On August 5 last year, the government knew that it had its back to the wall. even a semblance of competitive democracy in Kashmir had now polarized into one bigoted pole of jihad, and it threatened to overwhelm any future election that took place there. And with that kind of mandate coming to assembly, would have held a gun to India's head and got things done that were completely unwarranted. So the only recourse left with the government of India before going into any elections there was to dismantle this infrastructure, this edifice, which allowed jihad to prevail and dictate terms. So Article 370 and 35A were neutered, and the state of Jammu and Kashmir was reorganized into two union territories. Ladakh was liberated. They were groaning under the weight of this slavery of the valley for 70 years. They were spun into a standalone independent union territory. And the state of Jammu and Kashmir was another union territory comprising Valley and Jammu. And a new system was sought to be built. So to that extent, August 5 decisions were phenomenal. Everyone, even the worst critics of this government, who were otherwise their supporters, had a lot of hopes from them, forgave every transgression, forgave every act of betrayal, and welcomed it wholeheartedly. And when I talk about betrayal, those were real bitter betrayals. Between 2015 and 2018, Kashmir was governed by a coalition of BJP and PDP. This coalition ran on an agenda of alliance, which was a document of betrayal, which was a document of terrible backstabbing, where everything that BJP stood for was negated, was abandoned. And hence, when August 5 decisions came, one felt exhilarated because it was least expected from the people who had just a few months back been part of a coalition that was run by self-confessed jihadis and jihad proxies. So as far as August 5 decisions are concerned, they are absolutely historic. I don't have words to praise, to welcome those decisions. But as Puneetji was mentioning, since August 5, a series of missteps have happened. A series of unnecessary decisions have happened, which seek to undo the impact of Article 370 instead of taking it forward to its logical conclusion. I was into some kind of a self-imposed restraint since August 5, though I noticed those and I said, I'm not going to nitpick and be critical. Let us support this government and let's wait a little longer to finally see where it is all headed, because you need to give elbow room to everyone to maneuver. Politics is never a straight line linear affair. You know, like the stock market trajectories, you go up, you go down, you go up again, you go down again. And in that jagged way, you sometimes move forward. You know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and half a step sideways, then 2 steps forward. So long as the trajectory is visible, moving ahead and up, you don't mind a few tactical retreats. But what I've seen in the last 9 months is only a series of retreats. And the last one was something that I thought is now necessary to be publicly rebutted and questioned. This was on 31st of March. A Gazette notification was issued which defined in the state of Jammu and Kashmir what is called a domicile citizen. Now, under Article 370, you had almost a dual citizenship kind of provisions prevailing. With the scrapping of 370, all citizens were at par, and this was a welcome decision. And you thought now, since this has been announced, the follow-up steps, the implementation will make sure that this equality prevails on ground. So all of us were patiently waiting for those follow-up steps. But what we see happening on 31st of March is a resurrection of a disparity in the name of domicile. How? Now you created a class of citizens in Jammu and Kashmir who, if they are living there for the last 15 years, will be entitled to all the jobs in the state government. This is bizarre. This is bringing back 370 from the back door. Why are you doing this? And this is just the first step. Having defined the domicile itself was a huge setback. Why do you need to define a domicile? And even if you do, look at the neighboring Punjab. They don't even ask for 1 year of domicile for the citizen to qualify as a domicile citizen. Only a sarpanch or a tehsildar or a patwari or a section officer in some government, if he certifies to the fact that you have a certain address where you are living in the state of Punjab, you are considered as the domicile citizen of Punjab. Not even 1 year of continuous stay there. In Delhi, it is 3 years, and so it is in UP. In Odisha, there is only 1 year. In likewise Chhattisgarh, there is 0. In Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, it is 6 years. In Telangana, it is 5. In Gujarat, it is 10. So what are we doing? 15 years in Jammu and Kashmir, where you had big walls barely few months back, and you scrapped 370 to dismantle those walls. And why were those walls to be dismantled is because they have come in the way of free movement of Indian citizens to and from Kashmir. Well, from Kashmir was never hindered, but to Kashmir was blocked. And to make up for 70 years of blockage, you should have allowed some open time for things to normalize. But no sooner than you bring down a wall, you raise another formidable wall. Just before that, you had sent an emissary to Farooq Abdullah, who is the retired Raw Chief, A.S. Dullat. I don't know what transpired between them, but within weeks, Farooq Abdullah was released, and then his son was released, and they were looking quite triumphant. They started dictating terms as soon as they were released. Around that time, you had propped up another party, a new party in Kashmir, which would comprise the renegades and the discards from other parties. And Prime Minister offers them and their huge delegation and audience. Amit Shah follows up with again huge audience between Prime Minister and Amit Shah, the Home Minister. They spent several hours with them. They're trying to indicate to the people of Kashmir that they are close to you and you approve of them. And who are they? They are the most discredited lot of politicians, led by Altaf Bukhari, in whose car RDX was found in 2018, who's been Mr. Moneybags of Kashmir and has been a conduit for money flowing to all political parties, including Hurriyat. Such discredited, rootless wonders start getting patronized, start getting encouraged. And what is galling is on 31st of March, when the first notification came, which defined the domicile, and it also said the domicile citizens will have monopoly over level 4 jobs, which do not give you more than 25,000 rupees per month salary. Within 3 days, it was changed to all jobs. In the middle of a lockdown, who's dictated this change to you? They fibbed and said, oh, there was an uproar, there was disappointment. So who expressed this uproar and disappointment? Where? People were locked up in their homes. Nobody was stepping out. Did they make 1 million Zoom conferences all attached to PMO to convey their uproar and disapproval? Or was it just a telephone call from Mr. Altaf Bukhari saying, please do this and please don't do that? And you present this as some kind of a popular public disapproval. I mean, what rot. So it seems that we are back to winning hearts and minds the same way as we were doing with Article 370 and 35A and several other concessions. After doing what we did with 370, the signals that we are sending are that of weakness, that we are willing to negotiate, that we are willing to make concessions. And in Kashmir, jihad is very quick on the uptake. When they sense weakness, when they sense an opportunity, they press home with advantage. And you've seen series of encounters. You've seen series of challenges to Indian state all over again. So it stands to reason. It's not suddenly out of the blue. And that is what is disheartening and worrying, because all the good work achieved in the past few months seem to be on the verge of going down the drain unless this reversal is checked, is stopped. And there's a lot of speculation why this, why it's such cold feet, why this weakness. CAA protests, Shaheen Bagh kind of mobilization is widely believed to have unnerved this government. They looked completely paralyzed in the face of a bunch of women blockading a key arterial road in Delhi and making a nuisance of themselves, which was then staged into a riot when Donald Trump visited India. And this government was literally begging for peace, for order. They didn't use their prerogatives, their power, their force to discipline. On the contrary, they kept pleading, they kept beseeching, they kept begging. And which is what you saw at the Tablighi Markaz also, when our NSA went there at 2 in the morning to plead, when a head constable and at best an SHO with a force of 200-300 was adequate to lead the riot act. So the overall demeanor, the overall approach to these challenges and the problems, the challenges mounted by jihadis, mounted by the rabid, radical, bigoted, lunatic fringe among the Muslim polity, is what seems to be responsible for this government stepping back and asking for truce. Probably softening of image takes precedence over taking tough decisions. I don't know. We can only speculate. We can only um, draw inferences from available evidence. But this is what meets the eye, and I've frankly shared my views.
Thank you, Sushilji. So there are a few leading questions on that. So Triptiji is asking, what is the solution? And Nishant Shukla is saying, we have got this abrogation of Article 370 after many years. So we have to wait so long. What can we do to sustain? As you mentioned, this is a step back. What can we do to convince our PMG for more evidence? On to continue more work on Kashmir. Abhay from FISI has mentioned, Sushilji Namaskar, how do you see the effect of JNK by the recent Bharat's claim on Gilgit and Baltistan? So these are the few things, Sushilji. I know you have to go for another interview, but we'll try to wrap up in 20 minutes, next 15-20 minutes. So, and there's, so would you like to say to these, respond to these people? Also, Dr. Vivek Kaul, who is a very good friend of yours, he's saying, we love your frankness, Sushilji, thank you. So these are the some questions which people have posed, and I would also like you to highlight about the, um, just a second, this Panun Kashmir Hindu Genocide and Atrocities Bill, which you have circulated to me and other people. So could you please highlight what is this Hindu Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Bill, and who can sign it, and how we can, this bill can be proposed? Yeah, please, thank you.
Thank you, Puneetji. I think, yes, I get asked this question all the time because what was achieved in August 5, 19 is far too precious to be frittered away. So how do we secure the gains of August 5? The only way, I think, because we belong to a democratic order and we love this leader and this government, we would like to ask them questions, frank questions, fair and square questions. Because unless you demand accountability, unless you raise these questions and demand frank answers, they will never, ever feel the pressure to do the right thing. It is the pressure from your own constituents who help you, support you, campaign for you, pray for you, lobby for you, raise funds for you, fight for you. If they ask questions, you don't answer. So I'm not talking about the usual critics and adversaries asking these questions who you can ignore and just do your thing because it is their job to criticize and to oppose. I'm talking about people within to start asking these questions in all sincerity and say, why do you do this? Who is Altaf Bukhari? And what is your compulsion to deal with him? Deal with a discard, a reject, a complete nonsense of a person in Kashmir. I mean, he is discredited among Kashmiris like nobody's business. He's the least credible politician there. And what is your deal going on with Abdullahs, who you have rejected from the rooftops, who you have accused, instead of publishing a white paper as to how under his watch an entire community was cleansed from Kashmir, how under his watch the entire insurgency was resurrected in 1996, how under his watch Kashmir saw Rohingyas being rehabilitated in 2012, how under his watch Kashmir steadily slipped into chaos, how under his watch, in his own voice, when he would speak in Kashmir at Hazrat Bal Mosque in Kashmiri, he would tell his cadre, that go, work with Hurriyat. They are our friends. We are not their enemies. And he would eulogize stone pelters, saying these are freedom fighters and they are not fighting to become MLAs or MPs, they are fighting for their nation. With such speeches, with such public statements, with such a track record, what are your new hopes from this guy? And why? And what is the urgency? What is the hurry? And when you tell the world that Kashmir is our internal affair, you tell Pakistan, you tell China, you tell Turkey, you tell Malaysia, you tell European Union, mind your own business, don't poke your nose into Kashmir. And then you surreptitiously invite some 27 MEPs to conduct them around Srinagar, give them a boat ride. You violate the red lines that you draw. You violate them yourselves. You make a mockery of this assertion that Kashmir is an internal affair when you take envoys in Delhi in 2 batches to conduct them around Srinagar and introduce them to finely curated delegations who come and meet them for polite conversations. This inconsistency, this lack of conviction in what you are saying, this public display of weakness doesn't help. It demoralizes, it sends confusing signals. And these questions are legitimate questions. These questions are not asked like an opponent does in order to deprive you of your job. These questions are asked by your sympathizers, by your supporters, because they don't want to see you fail in these important missions. And therefore, these questions have to be asked in all sincerity, resolutely, seriously, and answers demanded. That is one effective way of not letting them fritter the gains of August 5, 19. We must raise a discourse, we must raise public interaction on these issues, we must build public opinion through these questions, through these interactions, and hope and pray that they grow some sensitivity, they grow some accountability to this opinion. There were other questions which I've seemed to have lost track of.
The genocide bill. Just a minute on the genocide bill. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, after August 5 decisions were taken, a lot of people started asking me, now that 370 is removed, now that Kashmir is gone into a union territory and everything is now stable, why don't you pack your bags and go to Kashmir? And I take pains in explaining to them what happened on August 5. If you look at the substance of it, was an announcement in the parliament and a few papers signed by the President of India. Nothing more. Yes, it did amount to taking away, in theory, a system that sustained jihad. But on ground, those mechanisms, on ground, those structures, on the ground, those controls were intact. Those people were intact. That bureaucracy was intact. People in academia, people in media, people in police, people in civil society organizations. You've done nothing to loosen their stranglehold on the entire establishment of Kashmir. A few announcements do not make the change. You have to bring about that change on ground. Now, while we were awaiting that change to happen, we were mortified to see steps in reverse direction. Number two, what I say is, when we left Kashmir, we did not leave Kashmir as some kind of displaced people due to some natural calamity. We were not flood victims or earthquake victims. We were not oustees from a dam site. We were cleansed brutally, violently. It was a genocide. It was a campaign, a pogrom against an entire identity. Now, unless you acknowledge what happened to us, you cannot just push us back there with some compensation to start life all over again. Because those victims and survivors also need justice. Far from delivering justice, the perpetrators of those genocide are roaming free. They have become popular icons. They become leaders. They are going around delivering sermons and homilies for future of Kashmir. They belong to gallows. Our homes, our temples, our businesses, our lands, our shops, our orchards are still under adverse possession. There are beneficiaries of our genocide who have profited from our bloodshed and our exodus. We cannot go and start living amidst them while they still have the incentives to commit another genocide. So when you do not punish them, when you do not retrieve their ill-gotten gains, when you not acknowledge that what happened to us was a genocide, you are sending us back to be victimized again.
Yeah.
Where is the lesson to all those who committed this genocide that don't even dare think about it in future? And how humiliating it is going to be for us if we do not get justice, if we go and live amidst them all over again as if nothing happened.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. In 1999, 9 years after our genocide happened in 1990, a smaller scale genocide happened in Kosovo. When Serbs and Croats were driving out a small Muslim population in Bosnia, in Herzegovina, in Kosovo. You know what NATO did? Their Air Force planes flew from the bases in Italy and they bombarded that place for 20 days, 20th of March to 10th of April. Civilian areas were bombed. This happened within 9 years of our genocide, and we've done nothing to give us justice and to punish those who drove us out more brutally, more violently.
Yeah.
So that is, and finally, we thought that because India is a signatory to the UN Covenant on Genocides, Prevention and Punishment of Genocide Covenant 1948 was signed by India in 1959. And by becoming a signatory, it was an obligation on India to create laws in its statute, special laws to deal with genocide, to punish genocide, to prevent genocide. It's more than 60 years that Indian Parliament has not yet created such laws. Our criminal procedure code, our penal code is a peacetime code. It is meant to deal with petty crimes of peacetime in civilized societies. Genocide is a messy, brutal business. For that, you need different laws. And you were obligated to create those laws. You are found wanting for the last 60 years plus. So it is about time and you saw a genocide during this period. So what we are saying, telling to the parliament that here you haven't cared to draft a bill, we've drafted one. Please debate it. Please amend it if you must, but please pass a genocide prevention and punishment act.
Okay.
And we are mobilizing public opinion for that. And I appeal through you to all those who are hearing this conversation to kindly help us build a widespread public opinion, to persuade our parliament to do what they have signed on as an obligation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushil. I think there's lots of questions. I think you need to go for another interview. Lots of questions on Tablighi Jamaats linked cases rises. So we'll take these questions maybe on the next show. So I would just wanted to end this with a good note that such a beautiful koel, cuckoo sound in your background. You're really blessed by Ma Sarda of nature to have such a wonderful voice. And everybody's praising that Sushilji has a very strong and good voice. Bring him regularly. So would you like to come? As we know, the media are very biased. So if this is the normal thing, would you like to come again on this kind of live Facebook shows? And I would like to invite Tripti ji, our president, to say a vote of thanks to you. And the bill you've just mentioned, we will circulate it on FISI Twitter page as well as HFB Twitter page, and I request all the viewers to please sign this and support Sushilji. He's been doing a fantastic job, and as Sushilji mentioned, we need to, although even if you support BJP, we need to ask legitimate questions regarding Kashmiri Hindu. Over to you, Tripti ji. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Sushilji. Your in-depth answers are very important. You're a very knowledgeable person. And what people probably don't seem to realize is that your answers create questions. It's compulsory in people's mind to think, why did you say this? Do I really believe what you were saying? So I'm really hoping that all the people who are listening to you raises these questions in their mind, start researching the real issues, because like you mentioned, and you started with 370 and abrogation and what it did and how we did it. So really, thank you very much for highlighting lots of issues. Thank you very much for actually giving us what is happening in Delhi, because lots of people here are social media warriors, and they read all sorts of things and just jump to conclusions. And what you have said is really like quite wide opening, like sort of like, I could only visualize like a lotus opening up all the leaves, and in there comes in lots of little bits of knowledge that you've departed. Let's make this at a regular interval. And I just want to also make another point here, that as you know, there is lots of background that goes on, and when we want to speak truth, lots of people pull us down. There was an article a couple of days ago pulling HFB down, all sorts of nonsense what they were writing. But I want to make sure and tell everyone that we do not tolerate any kind of hate speeches and hate crimes. We only put the truth. And Sushilji, you have today spoke the truth about the Kashmir genocide and everything else, and we fully support that. So thank you everyone for attending this. And thank you, Puneet, thank you, Lakshmiji, and everybody else for this wonderful, wonderful session this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushilji. Namaskar. A lot of people are saying make it a regular event every Saturday if possible. And people are saying that we want to see you in Rajya Sabha, Sushilji. So
my God.
This is
correct.
Tripti ji, first of all, I'm grateful for your kind words, and Puneet ji, Lakshmi ji, all of you, I'm really, really grateful for giving me this opportunity to interact with you, and through you, all the friends who are connected. It's really heartening and humbling to see people interested in details in these questions and in answers. And I'm sure as we connect better, as we interact more, uh, things will improve. And through our interactions, hopefully, we'll get more and more clearer. It's valuable feedback that I get in terms of questions and the responses. I'm once again very, very grateful for this opportunity, and I'll be very happy to connect again whenever you think I'm needed. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaskar.
Live streaming has stopped now, Sushilji. Thank you. On a personal note from all of us, Lakshmi, you can come as well. Live has stopped now. So really, really thank you. I know I have heard that you go for another interview or something. You need some time for rest and then. So Lakshmi, Sushilji and Triptiji, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Really,
everyone.
people have, so many questions. Sushilji, see, I've got written at least 12 more questions, mostly related to Gilgit, Tablighi Jamaat and things
But
like
yeah, that remain unanswered.
Yeah, I think we'll take up next session.
Yes.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
I think you need one special one on, that steps of jihad, and addressing specifically grooming jihad, activities here in the UK and globally and in India. So there you can plug in the Tablighi Jamaat and all of that. I think we should do another one in the next 10
I think
days.
I'm now gained some confidence. For starting 15 minutes, I was really nervous. I don't know why. But
you got us.
no, thank you for the opportunity.
मेरा background में support के लिए.
Yeah, I think Lakshmi, उसके लिए ना हमको ज़्यादा काम करना पड़ेगा for legally as well, क्योंकि as you know we have a huge problem here. Anything we utter a word and like that article, we still need to get that answers going. I just don't know, everything we say Hindu Forum is these fascist and this and that, and we need to look at the boundary between what the HFB can want to do, because we've always done the Kashmir thing. Even you remember, Lakshmi, before you came on board, I was doing all the Kashmir things. So let's get on with it and be absolutely 100% clear that what we can say and where we're going to be pinned down. Because privately, let me just mention to 3 of you that with this whole issue about care and the Kashmir and all that, I'm doing some